Greetings, M Squared, and today we are going to talk about absolute value functions, graphing them, finding the vertex and the axis of symmetry. So the parent function is f of x equals x squared. Remember, f of x is just y in disguise, so if you had y equals the absolute value of x, that means the same thing. And the absolute value function is always in the shape of a v, so it's always good to remember that when you have an absolute value with an x inside, not an x squared or any weird x, but just an x, you have the shape of a v. It can be up like that, or it can be upside down, so it's going to be one of those shapes. And so today we're going to start learning how different things affect a, whether it flips it upside down or makes it narrower or wider. Two things you have to find when you're doing this is they're going to ask you to find the axis of symmetry and the vertex. So the axis of symmetry is the line that goes down right in the middle of the absolute value, goes through the vertex, which is this point right here where it stops going down and starts going up. It's the turning point. That's the vertex. The axis of symmetry is a line. Make sure you know it is a line. So when they ask you for the axis of symmetry, they're asking for an equation of the line. So this one is vertical. All vertical lines only have x. Why do they only have x? Because why is it called x equals 3, I should say? Because every point here, right? This point right here is 3, 4. And this point right here is 3, 3. And this point is 3, 2. And this point is 3, 0. 3, negative 1. 3, negative 2. Notice that every time x is 3. That's why we call the line x equals 3. So if they ask you to graph an absolute value and ask you to also find the axis of symmetry and vertex, the axis of symmetry is going to be x equals whatever x value that points. When you get to Algebra 2, you learn about the absolute values that go left and right. But in Algebra 1, we stick with the up and down ones. So axis of symmetry and vertex. Alrighty, let's try to figure out what is going to make it change. So again, our parent function, when it's like this, you're up 1 over 1 on both sides. The slope is positive 1 here and negative 1 here. That's how that goes. Well, when you change this, do you see what's changed? Now I have a negative out in front of it. And it doesn't matter if there's only a negative with no number, then we'd consider it 1, right? But if there's a negative 2, a negative 5, whenever there's a negative in front of the absolute value sign, it flips it over the x-axis or flips it upside down. So you'll see that this one right here was upside down. You look at the slope. Now the slope on this side is positive 1 and the slope on this side is negative 1. So it just kind of flipped which side was positive slope and which side was a negative slope. When the number in front of the absolute value is between 0 and 1, that actually shrinks it vertically. You see how it's kind of smashed down from the top and it's kind of goes up at a slower pace. And this slope right here is up 1 over 2. So this slope is 1/2 and this slope is negative 1/2. And then what happens when this number is bigger than 1? We already figured out this is 1, this is negative 1. Now what happens when it's between 0 and 1? And what happens when it's greater than 1? Well, you can see that it kind of stretches it. It stretches it by pulling it up, pulls it up that way, and so the slope gets larger. So what's the slope here? Up 4 over 1. The slope is 4 here. And what's the slope here? Up 4 left 1. So the slope is negative 4. Now take a minute to look at those slopes. What do you notice about the number in front? You see how it's the slope? Like this is 1 and negative 1. This is 1/2 and negative 1/2. This is 4 and negative 4. So that little number out there, we call it A. That number is going to flip it upside down. It's going to stretch it. It's going to change the slope either by stretching it or shrinking it. So it's important to look at it and kind of figure out what's going to happen before you graph it so you know if your graph is correct. So let's try to graph a few. But let's talk about it before we graph it. So when we look at this right here, I see that it's positive, so I know my V is going to be up. I see it's 1/4, so I know it's going to be kind of more spread out. And I already should know that my slope is going to be a 1/4 and a negative 1/4 because I just figured that out over there. So what are we going to do? We're going to make a table of points. Whatever makes the inside of the absolute value 0 is usually what I put right there in the middle. And then I choose points left and right. So I'm going to choose some negatives and some positives. I like to be smart about how I choose points. I could put a 1 there and I'd get a 1/4 x, 1/4 times 1, which is 1/4. But I like to be smart about it and use numbers where it's not going to cause me to have fractions or decimals. So I'm going to choose -4, -8, 4, and 8, because I know that I have to divide by 4 once I take the absolute value, which means I'm going to get a nice pretty integer. So when I put a -4 in there, the absolute value of -4, let's try -8, absolute value of -8, all that means is how far I am away from 0. And so I am going to say -8 is 8 away from 0, and 8 times the 4th is 2. Same thing here, -4, how far is -4 away from 0? It's 4 times 1/4 is 1. 0 times anything is just 0. The absolute value of 4 is 4 times the 4th is 1. The absolute value of 8 is 8 times 1/4 is 2. So now that I have all my beautiful points, I'm going to graph them. So over -8 up 2, over 4 up 1, 0, 0, and here we go. And you can see as I graph that without a ruler, so I'm trying to be really straight, you can see that it's smashed down. It just, that 1/4 actually shrunk it. Vertically shrunk, that's what we say. That smashed it a little bit. Okay, let's try this one. So I noticed two things. I know there's a 2, and I notice there's a negative. The negative tells me it's going to be upside down. The -2 tells me it's going to be a little steeper than the regular. So my slope is going to be 2 and -2. All right, we're going to pick some more points. Again, whatever makes this 0 goes in the middle, and then I choose some points before it and after it. And since I don't have a fraction out here, I'm just going to choose -1 and -2 and 1 and 2. So -2, absolute value of -2 is +2 times -2 gives me a -4. Absolute value of -1 is 1 times -2 gets me a -2. The absolute value of 0 is 0 times anything gets me 0. And then I put the 1 in, and I put the 2 in. Now I will say that this is the very beginning of doing this. So the next section we talk about what shifts it left, right, and up and down, and then the left and right start to change what's inside that absolute value sign. So we'll do that on the next video on absolute value. So now I'm going to graph this. So -2, -4, -1, -2, and then I go back and graph these guys as well, and you see that I have my little absolute value. So that is just the beginning lesson on absolute value, graphing absolute value using a table and understanding how that little number out in front, which we call A, looks like this, y equals A times the absolute value of x. How this little A number out here affects the graph. So good luck with that graphing. M squared signing out.